All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, terrific. Okay, Brad, do you want to introduce the next
I do.
item, please?
Trish, do you have the thing? Okay, awesome. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning.
Yes. So, I wanted to give the executive committee a heads up to, I think, something that will be entering your inboxes. Thanks to Doyle, if you're watching.
He's not there yet, I just left him.
Oh, okay, okay.
Shortly.
Which is the my annual performance evaluation in a new and I think improved format that, number one, will be easier for the 15 board members to complete. Number two, ties to our performance scorecard system in, I think, a pretty innovative way. And three, most importantly, unlike the former performance evaluation where the board had to try to figure out what I did on an annual basis, that you don't have to anymore. What you're asked in this new evaluation format is how I performed, or specifically whether or not I did the work that PSTA did with the principles, the guiding principles or values that we set for our organization. So what I did, 75% of my overall score is based on the scorecard results that Trish just passed out of our organization, of how well we performed against the 5 strategies that we set out for ourselves. We did very well in year 1. So that is sort of the work that my performance evaluation is based on the work of the organization. So it's really based on the work of all these fine people sitting around behind you and over there. I think, Rachel, correct me, we are asking Doyle to send this out and then give a week to the PSTA board?
Until the 13th.
Okay, so like 2 weeks. Basically,
No, it's
well, a week and a half.
A day. I mean, I don't know if he sent it out yet. I have to get a hold of him, but
Okay.
he's expecting to today.
Having done this in the past, we strategically know that if you give too much time, then we get fewer responses than if we give a tighter window. And we have the chair of the PSTA board send it out and collect the results sort of to create the level of independence. But essentially, what the PSTA board has to do is take a look at these and just basically fill out a 1 to 5 on the values that we adopted for how the employees of PSTA need to perform their work, whether I was a good communicator or had good communication, whether we listened to all sides of the debate, whether we designed customer oriented, whether I incentivized or prioritized innovation and quality and efficiency, and then professional development of the employees. So that score, taken by the 15 different board members, which no doubt there'll be differences, will then be factored in on the last page of the form with the scorecard being 75% of the weight. So out of 25 points, that's the 25% weight to give the final score. Then the board members are asked to use this matrix, which is what all of the employees of PSTA have used, where obviously based on the score is tied somewhat to the level of compensation adjustment. So the performance leads to the score, to the compensation adjustment. But there's a fairly broad range in each of the categories, so it's somewhat subjective too. This is the system that Transpro, Mark Ash and his company came up with for PSTA to use, tied with the scorecard. My goal is, at least my goal is, I think this is a better format, and hopefully it'll be a format that's easier for the board members and maybe is less subjective across the breadth of our awesome board. If you have any thoughts or feedback?
I think it's a lot easier to
Should be
understand,
quicker.
and it's not so subjective. No real metrics to plug in.
Yeah.
I like it too, and I like the way it's set, the questions are very good in supporting questions. I think one of the weaknesses to these types of feedback form, not just here but anywhere else, is that a CEO tends to, it's called, what is it called, the halo or the horns effect, where if you just did something really well, you know, despite the rest of the year, you have a halo, but then if some mistake was made 2 weeks before it goes out, then, you know, your scores go way down. So this is a real balanced way of looking at things overall. My one question is there an area where we would add narrative or explain our score?
Well, we had a lot of debate about that.
Okay.
There is blank space on the piece of paper
Okay.
that I don't know if that's actually, if you type it in though, you'll have to fill out with a pen, I think, right?
Well, I believe it's gonna be sent out in the Excel format.
Oh, I guess you
So
could just type it right in
Go
there.
in there and
You know,
type something
down
in
below,
if you
or
wanted.
I think the blue areas where you write in your score are a cell that will add up
Okay.
for you, so that if you put text try to put text in the blue, it'll mess that up.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
and then the way we're still following the traditional method where the scores from all the board members that submit the form will be tallied and then presented to a personnel committee meeting, which is all of you. No, I don't think it is Commissioner Rice. It is the chair, vice chair, and secretary, treasurer of PSTA, and then 2 additional board members. And that meeting is now on the calendar for Friday, February 15th. And then the Personnel Committee will look at the results, make a recommendation to the board this month, which is how we've done it in the past.
Right, Chair.
Yes.
I'd just like to say that I would like to have the ability to have some kind of input, which is subjective, but I like the format of this, and the questions are well structured, and so it'll work fine, and hopefully it'll increase the speed with which this program gets done. I know you always have to end up chasing a couple people at the end with the
Yeah.
fire system.
Yeah.
Commissioner George, do you have any comments?
No, I think it's great. It's a lot of work culminated finally, and
Yeah.
yes.
It's a long way from where we
starting to
start
have
now.
some,
Right,
well,
right.
yeah, starting to have some meaning now that we have some history too. And
Yep. Okay. Well, where's my, that was easy button?
Okay, all right. Do we need a motion?
Is this an action
It's an
item?
information.
You wanna-
It's an information item.
Okay,
Did I thought?
okay.
Okay, and do you want to take us into the board agenda, Mr. Miller?
I do, if I have a copy of that, which I don't see. Not have a copy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the two main action items on, well, at least that we're taking a look at, main action items for this coming board meeting are the evaluation and the, well, in the spirit of trying to follow what Congress does in a more effective way, my hope, I think Debbie's and my hope was that we were going to create an omnibus bill, which was going to be buying a whole bunch of different kinds of buses all in one package at the same time. Just no pun intended, but
Yes, it was.
that appears not to be the possible. So this, I think, will present all the different kinds of buses that PSTA wants to purchase in the coming year. We definitely are going to be ordering the final two electric vehicles from BYD this month for a total of 6 that we'll then have. We want to order some additional trolleys to replace some of the oldest vehicles in our fleet, some of the trolleys that we have now on Central Avenue and the Suncoast Beach trolley. And we're looking at buying ones that are more like the Jolly Trolley operates for those. And then we, along with all the other transit systems in Florida, participate in a consortium to buy replacement buses as well. And that contract has now been approved by the lead agency, which this year happened to be the Jacksonville Transit Authority. Although our own favorite, Henry Lukasik, Director of Maintenance, he was the chair of the committee that put the specs together of all the different maintenance managers around the state. But we've been told by the JTA that there's been a delay. They awarded it, their board awarded it in December, but they have not signed the contract yet. And this year, for the first time, they've created a sort of a menu procurement where there's different suppliers available to the transit systems across the state for buses. So Gillig, which is the one that we have lots of Gilligs, New Flyer, and Nova Bus, all.
What's the last one?
It's a company called Nova Bus. Buses and regular kind of buses, since 99% of transit buses are purchased with federal government funds, and the federal government has specific rules, laws about Buy America provisions. The vehicles have to be made in America, and there's really only about 3 companies. Those 3 companies that meet Buy America. So, unlike in years past, where only one supplier has provided basically all the vehicles for every transit system in Florida, now different systems can buy different vehicles. But that's going to be delayed. We're going to go ahead and buy the electric vehicles at this meeting, and then
How many?
just the 2.
Okay, Joe?
Yeah. I'm not familiar with Nova Bus. I have ridden on New Flyer in one of the national parks. I forget which one. I think Grand Canyon, but I'm not sure. But I take it BYD does not count as made in America, and that's why
Well,
they're
they
not
do.
on that roster.
The rule gets more technical. 51% of the component parts of the vehicle have to be made in America, and final assembly, which is very detailed design, defined, has to be made in the United States. So the BYD organization has a parent company in China, but its final assembly, it's assembled out in California.
Okay,
And
well, the
at
reason
least
I'm
51% of the parts are.
Correct. Well, the reason I'm asking the question is, if we're gonna buy additional electric buses down the line, I'm not sure whether the other three companies that you mentioned are do produce an electric vehicle, and number two, will it be compatible with our charging system if we buy from another carrier?
Good questions. And we're, specifically Henry is very attuned to the bus business, and all those companies are working on an electric vehicle. The question about whether they comply with, are compatible with our charging system is something that we're trying to look at. Yeah, now we're also monitoring the Trump administration has, put certain restrictions on all sorts of products from China, including perhaps BYD. There's also a rail vehicle manufacturer that's Chinese owned, and they're also monitoring this. It's still being debated. Right now, BYD is okay, and any contract that's already in place is okay.
Right, but
that's
we're gonna
something we
need
have
more
to-
buses down the line than just 6, more electric buses than just 6.
Yes,
So we've gotta be able to have a steady supply source, not only for renewal parts, but also for new vehicles.
exactly.
So that's why I'm asking.
I can send you, there's been some interesting news articles that I've seen that New Flyer and Gillig are hiring lobbyists and lobbying on behalf of the Trump administration to kick BYD out of the business. The plant in California is the congressional district of the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Republican. It's his district. So he is garnering up all the Republicans to save BYD. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen.
So may I intercede here for one thing finished?
Yes, I am, thank you.
But we're okay for now. We have a contract that's up to 25 BYDs.
Okay,
We're okay.
thank you.
So to this conversation, I told you, and I know you've heard me say it because I talked about it at the Strategic Plan Commissioner, but I had a great conversation with Secretary Gwynn 2 Fridays ago after the T-BARTA meeting, and Ming Gao. And Cassandra will maybe remember that I have talked repeatedly about the possibility of using that little train as a pilot project on the BRT line. And I have not heard anyone, except Cassandra, who has said, well, we can't do that for a variety of reasons. But I am thinking, oh, yes, we can, if we think we can, because I'd like to know where in this discussion, because I don't see it on the agenda. You may remember in our last debriefing, I said, Brad, I think we have to move away from that BRT messaging. It connotes heavy, clunky buses in the public's minds, and we have to move towards a more streamlined, futuristic, glitzy, snappy, exciting thing that makes reference to some form of transit, that it's rapid transit or it's regional transit. And where are we gonna have that discussion before we decide that we're gonna spend tons of dollars on buses?
Good question. Your innovation has been duly noted, and we're actually trying to check on, we're trying to get one of the leaders of the group from Miami
Did you
Do
talk
know?
to that gentleman?
I have made a call to him, and we're hopefully going to talk this afternoon about him coming and presenting the vehicle, some more information about that vehicle.
So here's my point. The county is about to go into this strategic planning session on transportation and on funding. And you know you're going to meet with Barry and Whit on these issues. So don't you think it would be wise for us to move down the path of doing something maybe a little bit different and maybe a little bit out of the box, instead of just continuing to move forward on things that we know now, given how fast the world is moving and how fast technology is changing things? I'm just asking the question because I don't see anything on here that reflects any of those discussions that we've had. And Cassandra, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to talk to Ming Gao, but he absolutely said, yes, we can include that in the scope for what we're doing. So why do you keep, not to put you on the spot, but to put you on the spot?
Well, we would have to first go back to our NEPA document and change that. We would have to change our budget and our cost estimates in order to accommodate that. And we would have to redo the design of the platform to accommodate a longer train. That doesn't mean that we can't start with something, and as the technology evolves, change out those trains, but we would have to make changes to the station platforms.
Well, what I have talked to Abhishek Dayal, our project management, our leader on the project, and he's talked to the design team, is about putting together some information to ensure that, kind of like Cassandra's saying, that we can get there. We don't want to slow down the project. We don't want to necessarily slow things down, but we want to make sure that we're not precluding it in any way.
And that's my point. I just want to know that some thought is going
Yeah.
into figuring out how we can move forward in that vein, rather than talking about, well, we'd have to do this and we'd have to do that. I mean, if it was easy, we would have done it already.
Right.
But I was terribly encouraged by David Gwynn saying that just 3 or 4 days before he and I were talking, he had had a visit from the new governor. And the one thing that the governor is mandating for the Florida Department of Transportation is that it must be very futuristic looking in terms of technology. It must be more nimble, and it must focus on the urban areas of our state. And I found that to be very encouraging, that, you know, we weren't going to have all these big brick walls in front of us going forward.
I do too. I do too. I think I had read that also. Unfortunately, as you know, sometimes it takes a little while for the leader's message to get down to the large bureaucracy of the Florida Department of Transportation.
Yeah, well, it's taking a long time to get it going here too, because I've been talking about it for a year already.
Well, hopefully,
I'm making my own self sound like a broken record.
at the
You have not been
conclusion.
talking about this train for a year.
Yes, I have. I talked to Cassandra about it when we first started moving with T-Barda. I don't mean, you know, as a board or anything, but I'm talking about it.
At the conclusion of this month's board meeting, we're going to be having an open house specifically on the Central Avenue BRT project, and hopefully they'll be in the lobby. All of the designers that we've got working on the project will be there, talking about different elements, and I know they know about the idea of this, potential autonomous kind of vehicle, and that their design is not supposed to be precluding it in any way. I certainly plan on, when they're all here in town, meeting with them and talking to them more about how we might be able to do it in a cost-effective way that doesn't slow us down. And I encourage you to also to share your passion for it with them. I was just going to say that it seems like in real time, despite the governor's focus on innovation, the DOT has added a number of steps to the process for our project. I guess there's a whole new process that the DOT has implemented
At the Florida DOT?
at the Florida DOT, not just because of the St. Petersburg project on Martin Luther King, but projects across the state where local municipalities are reducing the number of lanes on certain roads. There's now a whole process that the DOT has created to analyze the impacts, and they have to sign off on any what they call lane elimination. And even though we're not even eliminating a lane,
Who pushed that forward?
I don't know.
Don't you think we need to find out? I mean, is this just some new person's idea?
It's a
Right?
form. Now, luckily, Ming has agreed. I mean, Evan, City of St. Petersburg knows about it now also. Ming Gao has agreed to pay any additional fees that it cost, any design fees that cost to get this approval, which is nice of him.
That's nice to know.
Yeah, but,
Yeah.
but I'd like to know why that new level of whatever and who is pushing that, or pushed it, or how come it's now surfacing. Don't you think we need to know that?
It was the fake outrage over the MLK project. It was some trumped up opposition to the MLK project that we had been working on and reaching out to people for months.
Well, now Central Avenue, or
Yeah, it was
It's also
just
spreading.
anti-Christman fake outrage. A couple of people upset about it, who weren't even members of the chamber, then went to the chamber and got the chamber to engage on it. And, if there was evidence that the way that the road was designed was somehow faulty. I mean, I don't know if anyone else has driven down it lately, but the road feels fine. It feels great. Traffic moves just as well, and it's more accommodating to pedestrians and bicyclists.
This is a new statewide policy that the DOT has, and it was not just the St. Petersburg, but there's a number of cities all over the state, according to Witt and Evan,
Well,
that are looking at very similar kind of projects. It's not.
When the opposition pushed back, they wanted to have council vote on it, but the mayor had the prerogative to approve the project going ahead, so that wrinkled some feathers. Even though council had already approved of the concept, approved the contracts, approved everything else, we didn't have the ability, nor do I think we should have the ability to come in at the 11th hour and kibosh the project. Just because we get a couple of phone calls from people in our district that may not like it. That's just, it's hard to plan projects or
Well,
do
I mean,
anything.
You're never gonna make everybody happy, no matter.
Well, exactly.
Wasn't there a project on East Bay?
What?
Or West Bay?
Yeah, what,
A
yeah,
proposal
yeah.
There
that got
was,
nixed.
but, yeah, that was,
What happened to that?
that was a complete streets thing,
Yeah.
the Water Bluffs.
Yeah, yeah, we've got a couple of
Some of the
people who are
merchants
negative
up there
thinkers
just-
and that tied up the project for the last, quarter mile of the project. The main part of it is owned by Largo, and they're happy with the project, but a couple of people on the last, from Indian Rocks Road west, concerned about it.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, this is a leadership issue more than a technical issue. I mean, I understand that this is coming from FDOT, but, you know, one of the things I learned is that the emotional pain of thinking that you're gonna lose something is twice as great as whatever you can get back in a trade-off. It's why so many people come out, when we're, in the past when we've proposed to cut bus routes, we have more people come out to protest it than actually ride the bus.
Right.
Because they don't want, the thought of losing something, even if you don't lose it, is a strong emotion. And even though we can explain that traffic will move just as quickly, even though we can explain it makes the roads safer, even though we can explain it benefits economic development, it's just not as strong emotionally as that thought that people are giving up a lane. And I think it's something that as transportation leaders, we just have to do a better job recognizing that some people feel that way, and it just takes a little bit more time to explain and walk through the project. And we also just have to realize that these projects are not going to have 100% agreement. We're always going to have a few people that want to keep the roads oriented more towards automobiles.
That's what happens when you're trying to change a culture,
Exactly.
which is what we're really trying
Exactly.
to do.
And I have strong confidence that we'll get this done, and FDOT will approve it. They're very supportive of the project, and they've all said they'll approve it. It's just new hurdles. Maybe the cynic in me thinks it was maybe sponsored by the engineering firms to get more money, but things agreed to pay.
That would not
We didn't hear you
surprise
say
me.
that.
It takes the heat off them to defend their studies.
Exactly. But I mean, that's an exciting thing, I think, to see how much work has already been done. I mean, this is the first project ever, first rapid transit project ever to make it to 30% design. So, we were so excited to tell the federal government, except that when we hit the 30% design, they were shut down. They weren't answering the phone. The other thing that I'm gonna present to the Finance Committee, which is 7A on the agenda, is I have a very high goal for myself, as Commissioner Barkley and the rest of you probably know. My goal is to make the most amazing PowerPoint presentation that answers every one of Commissioner Schulman's questions before he has to ask it.
Good luck with that.
Commissioner Schulman, I know, will have a lot of questions, and I've been spending a lot of time with Alan Zimmett, the historian of PSTA, to lay out all of the work that has been done over the many years about the non-participating cities, the 5 areas that don't levy the ad valorem property tax of PSTA.
Brad, to that point, could you ask him to get us another copy of that resolution that Senator Jones?
Yes, I now have it.
Good. I think that's important because that expired some years ago, I
It
do
did.
believe.
It did.
So it doesn't really exist anymore. Hence,
Well, that's part of my presentation, is what that was all about, and that it has expired, but sort of the fundamental issue remains that it's a very difficult hurdle to climb without some kind of legislative change. But under the current legislation, having these referendums and things like that seem like would be very difficult to get those member cities to participate. But it's worth everyone sort of reflecting on how much effort, and really how this is probably the #1 issue that has dominated the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority Board since its creation in 1982. I haven't done an Excel analysis of all the resolutions, and hours of debate on this, but since 1980, actually since 1981, before PSTA was created, this was the biggest topic of debate. So,
Do you think there might be any gravitas that Dennis still has with those beach communities? Commissioner George, did you have a comment?
No.
I thought you raised your hand.
No.
No?
Alan Zimmett will be here, will be joining me to, and maybe he might be able to better answer that question. I mean, it's a good question, whether or not.
He's the one that put it forward.
Yes, he did. I'll talk to Alan about it.
Just a thought.
Yeah. So that'll be a fun discussion.
If they were all to come in, do we know how much additional money that would bring to PSTA?
Yes,
Do we?
$4 million.
Yeah, from 4 million, 4.1 million.
4.1 million.
Maybe. I don't think
What are the 5 cities, which,
The two big ones are St. Pete Beach and Treasure Island,
yeah?
it's,
Kenneth City,
yep,
in the city?
so I have that.
Oh, you don't know.
Bel Air Beach.
Beach. One of the cities up north.
And then the South Pasadena Fire
Mhm.
District. I thought it was the Tierra Verde, but it's the South Pasadena Fire District, which covers part of Tierra Verde.
Yes,
Um,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got to be involved in this because there's 2 of my cities that are involved here.
South Pasadena Fire District area. Yeah,
And Kenneth City.
yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so we're taking a look at the non-member cities, because that's been a topic, obviously, of a lot of discussion. But the idea really behind presenting this information would be to present some of the other ideas that people have had about generating additional revenue, or things like some of our legislative, we're going to be talking at the legislative committee about our legislative strategy to answering some questions about the bed tax, the tourist development tax,
Mhm.
about that as a revenue source. We're going to be talking a little bit about other legislative ideas that folks have come up with, that, and how those might work. We're going to be, we're working on a presentation about Pinellas County schools and
Mm-hmm.
that option.
Yep.
Trying to get it in schools as well. So we're kind of like ticking down these different ideas that folks have had, just, and gathering as much information as we can on each of them, trying to estimate whether they generate revenue or the expenses, or what, on each of them.
Yep, Joe?
I would think that with 4 members of the county commission on the PSTA board, we would have some clout with regard to some of those issues you're discussing.
Yeah.
Yes, we would, but it's not all up to the county.
Mm-hmm. Right, I understand.
Yeah, especially if we talk about gas tax, for example.
Mm-hmm. Let's see,
What?
gas tax, is that state or?
Well, the split between the county and the cities.
Yeah.
And unless the cities are willing to give up their share,
Uh-huh.
I don't know that
It doesn't gain us anything.
it
Yeah.
doesn't really gain us anything.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, but we don't know. I mean, if the gas tax was increased, there could be a different split proposed.
Yeah. Well, we're actually trying to put together all this information, summarize it, and then have, ultimately, Sandra's working on it right now, is a comprehensive document, sort of an FAQ, a list of all these different things. How much money does this, how the gas tax works, and how much money would that produce? How much money potentially, and you know more than I do about the whole the bed tax. The non-member cities, the Pinellas County School providing transportation for school kids, and any other idea.
So did it come up at the, because I wasn't there, at the Transportation Summit about the surface transportation money?
Yes.
Yes, it did.
Well, it did. I don't think it's.
Was it immediately trashed again? I mean,
No.
Because.
No.
I think I was at a different meeting than Darden was, given your top 10 piece, but, you know, Commissioner I heard, this is what I heard.
Mhm.
I heard lots of new energy and lots of new commitment to moving forward with pretty much all of the ideas that had been surfaced. I didn't hear anyone that just pushed back and said no. And what was amazing to me was that Commissioner Seal made the comment that maybe it's time to do a referendum, and maybe we could do it this fall.
Oh,
Like they
Yeah.
did in Hillsborough.
Yeah.
And to that point.
We'd have to get our act together pretty quick.
We would, but there have been, based on that comment, several large business people that have reached out and said if we're really, really serious, they'll come to the table, they'll put the money together to help fund the effort like was done in Hillsborough.
Right, because the TDC funds are fine, but we can't use them for operating as far as I know.
We can't use them for
That's not-
operating, and if we did.
It'll build us new things, but we
If-
still have to operate them.
Right. If the formula, it was just a proposal, God knows where it will go, but Commissioner Seal indicated that that would bring about 12 million,
Which,
40, 40, 20.
oh,
Wait, what would bring 12 million?
for TDC.
For the
Oh, oh,
TDC
oh.
bed tax. If we change the formula that we currently have
Mhm.
in stone, and instead of 60, 40, we made it 40, 40, and 20, and the 20% came right off the top.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize it, but the millage cap for PSTA is different, or not PSTA, but for transit is different in, all over the state.
Yes.
It's not a standard thing, and ours
Why is
is the
that?
lowest, or
Well,
close to the lowest.
PSTA is a unique animal, even though we're an authority, just like Hart and Orlando and Jacksonville, because we were created with a local bill, very specific to PSTA. PSTA has the 0.75 cap. Hillsborough, Jacksonville, Orlando, South Florida, they are under a different section of the.
Yeah.
Or do you know what are their
But,
millage rates?
you know, what's troubling to me is how did they get away with a general bill for Hart when they're specific to Hillsborough County?
I don't know. I can add that to my research list.
Well, I mean, a local bill is for local
Right.
stuff. If you're gonna do something that has statewide impact, then it's a general bill. I don't see how Hart has statewide impact.
I'm not
Do
sure.
you?
I know that there is a section of the Florida statutes that is governs regional transit authorities and lays out their responsibilities and that's the section of the law that was amended by the legislature just recently regarding T-BARTA. T-BARTA is a regional transit authority under that statute.
Are you saying Hart is as well?
Hart,
Well, now that we go over to
Orlando,
Hillsborough-
Jacksonville, and South Florida.
So now that we go over to, well, this is an idea, now that we go over to Hillsborough and we go down to Manatee, right, don't we have from the VA?
There is a route.
that goes down to Manatee. Can't we do an amendment in the 11th hour to include PSTA in the regional transit section? How about we think about that and maybe have a conversation with Ron? Because that's just a stroke of the pen.
No,
And the waning hours.
Right.
as I mentioned, I have a whole section of this FKQ, the whole area of just various legislative proposals.
And what would it take
That
to-
would be, what it would take to do that.
What would it take to raise our cap? to even
Yeah,
as
raising the
local?
cap. There was some other, there's several ideas that are just sort of Tallahassee.
Well, that is a tweak, Brad, that we wouldn't want to necessarily advertise to the world.
Right.
Because potentially, you could get it in the waning hours.
But if we tweaked it to be a regional, then we're basically moving it from one part of the statute to the
Yeah.
other. That's not just a
It is if we're just adding it in there. We're not creating any kind of a new entity.
Yeah, but how do you get rid of the restrictions that are there in the bill that we're in?
Because we're not just local anymore.
But if you said it's specific to Pinellas.
The PSTA
The
law.
PSTA law is.
Right, I know.
But we already have moved beyond that because we go to Hillsborough and we go to Manatee. It
Right,
is.
I know that, but
I don't know why, or,
it's worth
I mean,
talking around about.
we can look into it. I mean, I don't know why back in 1981 or 1980, the decision was made to go with the local bill versus, I think the Regional Transit Authority section was already there. It's weird.
Well, that statute didn't come into existence until 2006,
What, the regional?
the T-BARTA piece,
Well,
T-BARTA was added, but Harts
in
and
2006.
the other ones were already there. And there's been many changes in that section too over the years.
I think it's worth a conversation, Brad. It could work. Gotta get crafty.
Yeah, I told Ron, I told Ron that it was his responsibility to
Yeah.
answer all these questions.
Commissioner Rice has a,
Unlimited number of questions.
I just wanted to go back and address the comment about the editorial. What I wanted to do was to really underline and punctuate what we heard at the forum, which were two unambiguous presentations that showed that Pinellas County has a lower gas tax than everyone else around us, and that Pinellas County contributes less to transit than other counties around us. The gas tax was brought up, and really, I mean, it was a strongly worded editorial, but it was also a way to show, support and political cover for those who want to look at something like a gas tax. There's other discussions to have that would be very fair discussions, like what we do about the non-member cities. There's been some talk also of the legislature allowing cities to hold transit referendums. And those are interesting discussions, but they're very far off and they're going to be very difficult to obtain. Whereas we have other things before us that are easier to get funding in the meanwhile until we figure out a longer term sustainable funding
yeah,
stream.
because the gas tax is not it. Yeah.
can I just say, though, the result was that you threw the county under the bus.
Yes, you did.
As if we've been asked for years to contribute to transit, which we have not, ever, aside from the chargers for the
That's
electric
true.
buses,
Mhm.
ever. And so we're not just gonna say, Brad, would you like a couple of $1 million to run your bus system, if he doesn't ask for it?
I agree
No.
with her.
Mhm.
So,
Well, no
Just
offense
saying.
was intended, but if it
I know,
got the
that
conversation
was-
started, then my goal
Mm.
was met.
not in a necessarily positive way, so,
Anyway, Brad.
not that it won't happen, but the result on this side of that
One of the,
is not positive.
one of the other areas that we're going to put in the analysis is a discussion of the difference between operating and capital funds. There's been discussions about the tourist development. STP has been asked before for and rejected.
We need to keep asking.
When did you ask? You asked for money?
Oh,
you
2 or
asked
3
from
years
Mark.
ago, yeah.
But you asked from Mark?
Yeah.
We did.
No.
We asked for service transportation program funds
Oh, from Forward Pinellas.
from Ford Pinellas.
Because they-
Those are capital funds. There's a discussion of penny for Pinellas, capital funds, and any kind of dollars would be amazing, but there's just differences in the way we can spend capital dollars versus operating dollars.
Well, and the TDC is even more restricted. I mean,
Right.
we could give you capital dollars to buy buses, but other kinds of funds, but the TDC buses that we would buy would have to be specific to,
The tourist-oriented services, yeah.
so there's a limit to that. Yeah,
Right.
but you guys are gonna have a meeting, she's talked about. You
Yeah.
and Whit and
Very.
Barry.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, so I think
So that's,
next, Brad, we've got 6 or 7 minutes.
So what is the Duke Power agreement? Is that about charging station here?
that is, Duke Power is going to be funding some car charging
Oh,
stations
they're doing that, yeah.
for visitors, for you,
Everywhere.
for others who might have electric cars. And they're also giving some funding to PSTA for some of the expenses we've had for installing the depot chargers here. They have I don't know if it's a grant or a funding source of some sort that City of St. Pete and other places have gotten, that they're putting these charging stations all over the place.
Mhm.
And that's to
Okay, just wondered.
get some here.
So whatever happened to the lawsuit? Remember there was a settlement, and now I can't remember what it was
The
for.
VW settlement?
Yes, the VW settlement. Is that
Yes.
still crawling along, or what?
It's crawling along at a very snail's pace here in Florida. It's moving at a faster pace in other states, I've found out, and we're very active in preparing for that, partnering with Duke,
Right.
hopefully on that, trying to get more intel on where it might actually be
Okay.
standing. But there's a potential for substantial funds for electric buses, battery-powered buses, through that funding source.
All right.
Yeah. So the last thing on our executive committee agenda is for Trish to give you a quarterly, we finished the first quarter, update on our new performance scorecard.
Good morning. I think that you all have our organizational scorecard at your places. And by way of refamiliarizing everyone with the navigation, this scorecard is measuring our performance on a quarterly basis on our 5 key strategic areas that are listed along the left-hand side: community support, financial stability, customer satisfaction, employee engagement, and commitment to performance. The metric description is shown, and then next to it is the performance goal that may be an annual goal or a quarterly goal, and that's indicated which is which. How many points each goal is potentially worth each quarter, and then in the color-coded column we have our actual performance for the first quarter. We also have on the following page a couple of notes, and rounding out the report are some additional information on the definition of each metric, how each metric is measured, and what the year-to-date column is reflecting, whether it's an average or a cumulative year-to-date performance. So as you can see, we are meeting our goals in most areas. I will bring your attention to a couple of things first. Our overall performance ratio in the bottom right-hand corner of 93 out of 100. Our color coding chart has been adjusted a little bit to make our goals a bit more stringent for ourselves this year. In the top right-hand corner, you have a chart that shows the achievement percentage. We're now marking our goals as green if we meet or exceed them only. Our goals are marked as yellow if we're between 90 and 99% of the goal. So yellow is an A, but we're not green unless we're meeting it or exceeding it.
Wow.
And
So
then,
last year it was green if it was over 90% or 90%.
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
right, yeah.
Trish, who is the audience for this performance?
Our internal employees and importantly, the board is the audience.
The internal employees?
Yes, we have all of our employees very engaged in the metrics that go into the scorecard. So there are committees that drive conversation and initiatives that improve performance. And we also present the results for the scorecard internally at our quarterly meetings and by email so that we make sure everybody knows transparently how we're all doing together.
And then just like my performance evaluation, all the other employees at PSTA performance evaluation is at least in part tied to the organizational, meeting the organizational goals. So hopefully they are very aware of it.
Yeah, I believe everyone is. You'll see in our financial stability area, we do have a couple of metrics that are showing red right now. As you know, we've just been a large piece of our discussion. We've adopted a budget that requires the use of reserves to balance our budget this year. So we have two metrics where we're monitoring our financial performance in that area. The top one, it's Org 5, is our annual budget variance, and that's measuring whether we are on target to meet or underspend according to our FY19 budget. We've added a second metric. It's right below it. It's the budget deficit reduction. We are challenging ourselves not only to meet our budget, but to shrink the $1.7 million deficit that we have programmed into our budget. So that's a challenging goal for us, but we did set a goal for that, to challenge ourselves to do that. We also have changed a bit. We're experimenting based on some board comments that we've received, the way the score is reported at the very bottom of the sheet. So we've heard a few questions on our practice of awarding bonus points for overperforming in goals. So we are experimenting with showing both a base score of 89 in this case, and then separately showing how many points we earned by overachieving our goals in this quarter 4 bonus point to create our overall score. And I would really love to hear any comments or thoughts from the executive committee on that practice and how we're trying to meet some of the questions that we've received about bonus points.
Well, I have a question about, so, I'm sorry, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Under Org 5, the budget variance and the budget deficit reduction, so you give yourself 0 points at this point. Is that just a timing thing? And so you end up scoring lower at the bottom because there's 0 points there because you didn't
For this quarter.
actually, oh.
Yeah.
Right, so.
So because it was just added, or is that something that you do every quarter?
We do measure that every quarter.
Okay.
On that particular metric, our year-to-date score, which is the very right-hand column
Mhm.
on the form,
Right.
our year-to-date score will show a cumulative score in that area.
So it's always going to be below goal until
Um,
the last quarter.
Potentially, I mean, if our spending has, been at or below our budget in a year-to-date cumulative fashion, it would be green for a particular quarter.
So before, last year, if you look at, last year, we just had to be within 2%. We could be 2% over budget and still get a perfect score. we could be 1% over budget and get extra
No,
credit.
less than or equal to.
So now we're
Could be
being
over.
tougher. Now we have to be below budget
Right.
to get scores. And then we've broken out and created two different metrics, Org 5 and 5.1.
Mhm.
So Org 5, like you were just saying, Commissioner Gerard, if we do believe that with timing, certain aspects of our financial reporting are due to timing of receipt of revenues and grants and things like that. And so there's a potential that we could start trending below, to be meeting our budget and then being below our expenses. I'm hopeful. And then we would start to get points. You'd start seeing some points being accrued in that Org 5.
Right.
And
Well,
then,
you're probably not gonna have any in the earlier quarters of the year, or you're less likely to, maybe. I'm just wondering, because I think it skews it a little bit.
right, although on the expense side, we incur more significant expenses in March and April than in any other time of the year because of spring break. We add a whole bunch of service to handle a large spring break crowd in Clearwater and Dunedin and all over the place. So our expenses are not nice and even either. So we're going to be tracking that. And then we decided, well, it's not so much that we just want to be within our budget. Of course we do. We also want to try to set a target so our employees start coming up with ideas, which is working. They're coming with lots of ideas on saving money. So we created the 5.1 and gave that 20% of, 8 points for the Org 5 and 2 points for the 5.1 instead of 10 for the whole thing, to so that we could see on the page how we're doing as far as saving money toward a goal of truly balancing our budget using revenues equals expenditures. So.
Okay.
We'll see. But,
Question.
Yes.
Going back to Org 5 of the annual budget variance, I know that the variances are usually captured at the end of the year CAFR report, but, so this is a way to help us capture a snapshot of it on a quarterly basis?
Yes, we actually receive reporting from the finance department on a monthly basis
On a monthly
internally.
basis.
Yeah, so we're able to show that on a quarterly basis for the scorecard.
And the PSTA Finance Committee receives it monthly as well.
I think it would be important to give that sheet, just that sheet, out to the board whenever you reconcile on a monthly basis. Because quarterly, well,
It's in the
just
packet.
so we, it is?
Yeah,
Oh,
we just
okay.
don't usually talk about it at the meeting, but it's in the board does receive it. And Debbie makes a verbal presentation at each finance committee meeting, sort
That's
of where we
true.
stand.
All right, forget I said that.
Well, this quarterly report will be in the packet for the board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe you could report back a little bit between now and the board meeting on the debriefings, Brad, how your meeting went with Barry and Whit.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure we're gonna get some pushback from at least one of our committees.
Hmm.
Use one of our what?
Members. Right? I missed it.
Yes, I'm sure.
Oh, never mind.
Hmm.
Well, as Trish was just saying, some of our PSTA board members have expressed concern about getting extra credit points.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're showing it in both ways to appease folks, but
Mhm.
it's not, there's no right way,
But make sure you make the point that you made it tougher on yourself too,
Yeah.
Mhm.
you know.
All right, do we have anything else, Brad? We're over 12, and some of us have other appointments to get to. Are we good?
Good.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess, thank you very much.
All right, guys, carry on. Have a great day.
Thank you.
I feel like I should give you a yes on something.
What? What'd you say?
So I feel like I should give you a yes on something.
Yeah, that would be good.